nice to be here. Finally, again, an in-person presentation after such a long time. And yet another Chilean presentation. So, what we're going to talk about today is about youth predisposition to participate in destructive or radical actions. And I'm just going to do the introduction, then I will leave the floor to Daniel, who's the team author. Okay. Yes, and first of all, what I want to mention is that this presentation is framed under this program of a research program on school citizenship, which is called PRICE in Spanish. It's something that we have a research agenda in citizenship education since 10 years already. We started in 2011 with Daniel and another team of researchers. And we have developed a bunch of, some already 5, now we have 6 projects in the area of citizenship education. We try to pack them all together in order to tell a coherent story, trying to force this research agenda, in which I think that the main aspect which identifies what we do is the political dimension of citizenship education, which is not usually, highlighted. So we actually are in the more political arena. And this is part of our team, and also graduate student assistants. So we are throughout the time, many people have participated here. So we are going to leave afterwards the presentation. If you want to check our website, then you can have also access to our all publications, presentations, and projects. So that being said, now to the presentation. Let me just briefly start with the introduction. Okay. The age of mass mobilization, what we have seen in the last years, particularly in the last decade, is huge, numbers of mobilization throughout the world. Actually, according to some reports, it says that at about 11–12% of increase that we have observed in the last 10 years of mobilization, such as the Arab Spring, and also Occupy Wall Street, and they usually these mobilizations are fighting for human rights. Economic inequality, environmental issues, and in many of them there's it's not really precise studies, but we have seen that there's a great participation of youth, of young people there, and this is actually something not really new throughout the history as well. Many of the mobilizations, revolutions, they have been guided, or at least with a great deal of participation of young people, but still we don't know really, don't have much information about the consequences for the next generation institutions, as well as we don't really know how large is the share of youth people participating in these mobilizations, and what are the consequences, whether they have increased in the last time or it's the same than before. So having access to a data set such as ICCS, we have the opportunity at least to explore 3 points in time and to see whether there are changes in time and participation, in particular in protest and in different kind of actions. Let's say there are pacific actions and also more radical actions, and we're actually dealing with this kind of participation in this paper, not with the other part, which is a traditional one, which is voting and so on, but with this other kind of participation, which is more related to social movements and mobilizations. So we distinguish between 2 groups of factors affecting political actions. First, the individual one, and this is the classical first explanation, which is the research model of participation, which poses actually is related to this rational hypothesis of mobilization, which is called the median voter hypothesis, which poses actually that people are going to mobilize, especially in unequal contexts, when the distribution of resources favors mostly a small share of the population, and also the people who mobilize are mostly the ones with more resources, especially money and time. So it's the classical hypothesis of political mobilization. Second, of course, in this context of an educational conference, civic or political knowledge, and we want to explore to what extent what happens in school to this regard affects different kind of political actions for youth. And finally, there is also a hypothesis of gender differences, because traditionally also related with the resources model, males are more, they tend to participate more, especially in this kind of political actions. And finally, running to the contextual model, we want to explore the role of economic inequality, because there are also hypotheses that and research in adult population in the last years suggesting that inequality is something that boosted this kind of movements in different countries. There is more disagreement about the diverse effect on different types of participation, with more traditional ones or social movements or radical action. It's not really clear in an adult population. And of course, there's even less information about what happened with inequality and youth in comparative research worldwide. So that's the main basis of our study. And now I leave the floor to Daniel.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, now I'm going to go into the objective of this work. As Juan Carlos mentioned, we try to evaluate this kind of theoretical framework in order to mainly address this idea and this general question about which are the future consequences of the experience of this kind of massive mobilization and radical mobilization. There is some evidence about Greece, for instance, one book that we can recommend in these days, and read some part of that, and they show how the experience of radical experience in participation in Greece have a very huge impact in terms of socialization for the future. And that is the general question that we try to in a first step, we need to understand what happened with this, and we are here exploring this kind of usual suspect, and there is a huge discussion in Chile about social outbreak. It was inequality, and we are trying to address, is inequality or not? What happened in this? Is inequality that trying to impulse this kind of participation? And the objective was to assess these gaps regarding adolescent willingness to participate in the disruptive or radical. We are trying to get the name or label of this kind of participation is some kind of issue, because some people call radical, others call disruptive, even in ICCS called illegal. In that way, okay, the best of the country, for instance, we're speaking with Cristobal in Argentina. Blocking traffic is not illegal. And in that case, why we can call illegal in that place? But the label is important. Here we are just calling it disruptive because of the consequences of this kind of participation or of this kind of political action, because disrupt the usual life in general. Spreading a little bit, because this is the one way, but occupying building, disrupt a lot of the usual life in the schools and for the parents. And in Chile we have a lot of experience in occupying schools and a lot of mess after when students occupy. The second one is given ICCS, compare the difference across time and countries, because there is a lot of information in that way. We have 99 CBET and ICCS in 2009 and 2016, and the next round, in that way we will have this kind of different waves, not wave in longitudinal term, but times measures and cross-sectional versions of the same questions, and the comparison across countries, because we have the opportunity to give that. After that, to analyze the roles of some individual characteristics, the usual suspect in terms of civic knowledge, because it's one of the most important measures in the study, and other kind of for the resource model, typically education of family, the highest level of education of family, and gender difference, because in this type of participation there is some evidence that shows, for instance, as well in Greece, this kind of differences between boys and girls in terms of the involvement, and in Chile we have some evidence in that way. But in other type of participation, that difference is less or even doesn't exist. And finally, the idea of economic inequality, because this is kind of a huge discussion in newspapers. But it was inequality, it's kind of a affirmation. But I think we need to provide evidence about is inequality and in which sense. And inequality was ever have the same kind of a pattern and explanation. And in that way, we will use the three cross-sectional version of this study. ICCS, CBED, ICCS 2009-2016, the number of countries, they're trying to use the full data available in that way. And in terms of variable, it's not exactly the same question in the different versions, but it's close, similar, and in all cases evaluate the same predisposition or the willingness to participate in these three types of participation: spraying or paint protest slogans, blocking the traffic, that is the predisposition or willingness to participate in blocking the traffic, and the predisposition or willingness to participate in public buildings like school or other kind of public buildings. And yeah, in terms of independent variable, in order to measure inequality, we're using now, there is available as well, Gini index by now, but obtained from the standardized world income inequality database, the WID, which is very good in order to measure this kind of contextual variables, because it's standardized and across countries, and there is information for the most part of countries for the SCCS country participant in that way. Only one, only for national time in 2009, there is no information. But for the other cases, in that case we can find 89 cases in terms of countries with information to the country level. But maybe I tried to do something like that maybe some years ago in my PhD process, and was more information missing about the inequality information. And for simplification, part of the educational level, we use the highest, but for comparability across the study, yeah, we use the University of and civic knowledge. Harmonization is a problem, but in here I show how handling it is and sex of the students. Yeah, the script I start for descriptive and multi-level random model in order to show the main results. How about that? About starting the result, this is a general pattern. This is the different type of spraying disposition 2009, 2099, 2009, 2016, and this is spray, blocking, and occupying. And what can I say about this? A lot of information. It's only something is spraying higher rates than the other type, because we can think, because it's easier to sing and occupy the building and blocking traffic, maybe taking more energy. In that way, it's more. But in the last wave, it starts to harmonize these three types. And there is a lot of variation between countries. And for instance, in Chile, we know for other work, in Chile increased from 2009 and 2019, 2099 to 2009, increased, but stabilized between 2009 and 2016. And for Latin America, almost the same history, but in other countries that have the three measures, it's not the same. In that case, it's important to go in deep, case by case, but this is not the objective of this, just for showing some descriptions. In terms of the general average of these three items, for comparability, we have a kind of four scale. We can show here, there is kind of increasing in the average between the years, which indicate this kind of a more willingness to participate in this kind of participation in a general average. Of course, there is a lot of variation across countries, but as well show about the variability in the different studies. For instance, in 99, we can show kind of more closer average between countries. This is called about the variance in between countries. But in 2016, there is more variance between countries, and which is consistently in the multi-level. And what about inequality? What we're going to observe in descriptive term, if we put the Gini index, what we can observe in a descriptive term, the correlation is 0.17, 0.37, and 0.71. This shows this idea of, okay, inequality is starting or increasing the importance in terms of course, here we can think about the selection of the group, but in what shows the general pattern here, the inequality is increasing the importance. If we thinking in the 2022, maybe the line will be more steep. I don't know. Let's see. What about the general result? Gini index in 2016 have mainly main effects without controls, and that effect is established when we put individual control, civic knowledge, girls and boys, university. University is important, which is a kind of evidence, but in the other way around of the typical resources model. In this case, is negative related with that kind of participation, which is consistent with some evidence from provided for Janmat and Hoskin and other evidence in Chile, in one previous work that we did. And when we include civic knowledge, disappears the effect, which is typically this kind of mediation process from the family's education to civic knowledge, and civic knowledge have a stable effect too. And the gender difference in here is what we expect. Boys have a higher disposition, or girls have lower disposition. This is just a representation of this general effect. For instance, this is civic knowledge, and use difference in standard deviation, and this is higher disposition when students have lower civic knowledge, and when they have high civic knowledge, the disposition is very low. And in terms of Gini, I use 25 and 45 in order to graph in the extremes, and we have this kind of a more equal context. The disposition is higher. What happened in 2009 is around the same story, but the Gini index is less stable because appear a little short effect without contrast, but disappear after individual variables are in the model. About the university, there is almost the same, it's negative without control, but after that there is some kind of suppression maybe. We need to interpret it a little bit. Civic knowledge, the same pattern, negative. Students have more knowledge, are less willing to participate in this one, and girls have a higher disposition in this higher difference between boys. Almost the same pattern, but the inequality pattern is a little bit low because this is representation of the model 2, and the general pattern of civic knowledge is almost the same. Finally, what happened in 99? Okay, as we can anticipate from the descriptive Gini index, doesn't have an effect in 99, which is more flat and less variance across countries. And I don't know, maybe inequality is more perceived, or there is something happening about inequality and this kind of participation, and I think it's an important issue. Again, resources is in the same way, more resources in terms of education, family, less disposition to participate in that way, disappear when civic knowledge is present, and the difference between girls and boys is stable as usual in this one. But the size of the effect is, if we can say something like in this step, is a little bit less in terms of civic knowledge, because the intercept is lower, as we mentioned previously. And that's it in terms of results. I will now go to the discussion a little bit about the results. Okay, the willingness to participate in radical actions increased a little bit in terms of average, but it's important to make distinction between the specific types. That is a quite kind of challenge in terms of the way in which to measure this one, or how to use the variable separately by each type, treating each one as a different issue, or using this kind of average condition. The spray seems to be more common disposition because take less energy in terms of anticipation, but the other is a little more common, a little bit, the willingness. Latin American countries are in the highest top in the disposition for the three, but taking my attention, Greece, Cyprus and Italy in 99 mainly, and in 2009 in which study participate, but because that country was in the top. Maybe that explains something about what happened after. But yes. And about inequality, more unequal context tends to increase the predisposition, maybe, for more conflictive societies. But the evidence is partial in terms of when we observe this kind of a time pattern. In 2006 it's very clear. In 2009 depends of the control that we're using. Overall, individual variables are explained are more clear. The disposition, but not the inequality context. And in 2009, no, there is no the effect of the Gini index. Of course, maybe we can use another kind of measure in order to see the stability of the model. But by now, this is the main result about that. But the education have the potential to encourage this type of participation via the transmission of civic knowledge. But civic knowledge is complex because it's very stratified. In that way, resources matter as well, matter in two ways. Indirect way, because they increase the predisposition to participate, but increases the level of civic knowledge as well. In that case, it's important to understand that kind of process, what happened in there between this education, civic knowledge, and in order to increase or disencourage this kind. And given the differences, the main results, okay, is as usual, but it seems that the difference is shortened across in time, because in 2016 is less than in the other version of the study. Next step about this, combining data. This is a kind of a challenging issue because the comparability of participation measure, because it's not exactly the same question. And some challenge about the harmonization of civic knowledge because it's not the same in the different version of the study. It may be using the position, relative position, or something kind of category version of that one in order to using and combining data. And as well, the contextual variables as challenging as well, because here we are using only Gini index, but maybe there is another kind of contextual variable in terms of inequality could explain, for instance, concentration of something, or rates of mobilization in the specific years of the study. Let's see. But by now, this is the result that we can show and we want to show today. And thank you for your attention.